and so this is coming to you as always from my vehicle, which is parked in Germany. And today I'm going to talk about the Yom Kippur War, the Ramadan War, the October War of 1973. And I think be a couple of things I want to say before I actually start. Well, three things, in fact, if I remember which three they're going to be. First thing, if you want any questions or anything, it doesn't have to be related to what I'm actually talking about now. Usually I answer the questions at the end, but it's occurred to me that before I actually start talking about this war, that I may say things which start getting a bit technical, and as I'm speaking without any notes or anything like that, then it could be that as this is a conflict I do know a little bit about, then if I go too technical, then please actually stop me to say something. Ideally, I would have a map, and I would be, I suppose when I just thought of this now, although I could have drawn one on a bit of paper, then held it up and sort of pointed at things. I could have done that. I don't even have a printer. I have not had a printer since 2007. And since it got when it got to the point where, for example, when I needed things to be printed, such as invoices, I just go and use there was a place to actually print stuff out not so far from me. Hello, Darren. And then most people these days don't even want a printed invoice. They're just quite happy to have it in PDF. In fact, they haven't even printed an invoice out for ages. So things like tickets for planes, well, it's all, I just bought a plane ticket. It's all on the app these days. Occasionally, there is once or twice a year I need to print things out for the trade fairs, but I normally do that once I'm inside. So therefore, I don't have a printer. That's my long excuse for not having one. The War of 1973 was 50 years ago right now, in fact, and in my opinion, this represents the most interesting battles ever in humankind, I would say, from my opinion. And I don't think it's not only this, because when I was in the army, admittedly wasn't in 1973, but I do remember the war. I remember seeing it on the television anyway. I can just remember one thing happening on the television. I wasn't following it that closely due to my age. But by the time I came to the army, which was a few years later, obviously, this was the war which was studied more the most, because this was new, and then at the time, and not only that, it showed modern technology. Not only that, it's really relevant. It's super relevant for things which are happening today, and as far as things like strategy, technology, supply are concerned. So from that point of view, I think that the lessons of the October War need to be looked at, and so do and to take from it also from a political level as well. Anyway, I'll come on to that. But one thing, just before I even start, I would say the following, is that in this war, the Israeli casualties, deaths, the highest estimate is at around 2,800 people. That's the highest. Most accounts are putting around 2,400 and 2,600. But let's say 2,800. That is 2 weeks ago, 1,400 plus people were killed in a terrorist incident. So that the losses of the 1973 war, that puts it this terrorist act completely into perspective. So let's go back to the beginning. So in 1967, the government of Egypt under Nasser made threats towards Israel, and as a result, Israel attacked its neighbors, attacked Egypt, then Jordan, and then Syria. and it ended up by having a tiny country like Israel, which has a waste, 15 kilometers in one place. In fact, I went and stood there, and you look over there and you see the sea. So you built up areas, and then there's the sea. And this was from the east to the west, of the country. So suddenly Israel had expanded into a huge, well, not huge, but it was what, 3.5 times bigger than it had been before. Admittedly, a lot of that, in the largest part of it, sort of desert areas in the Sinai, but it also occupied the what is the West Bank and the Golan Heights. Now, previous to 1967, sorry, between 1948 and 1967, Gaza had been the end of the first Arab-Israeli war. Gaza was actually taken by Egypt, so Gaza went to Egypt, and what was the West Bank went to Jordan. And so when these countries then lost these territories in 1967, it wasn't so difficult for them years later in the 1980s to actually withdraw their claims to them. Indeed, I believe that Gaza has been offered to Egypt, and Egypt has refused. As a result of this war, so we've got this big Israel, and now the problem is finding a peaceful agreement. Now, the Israeli government was more than happy to say, well, we will give up all of the territory, but we want a comprehensive peace agreement with the states around it, and this was refused. Now, when we talk of the war, normally, if you look at any books or videos or documentary and thing, they always start with the war between Israel and Egypt. But this, in my opinion, is not the thing that people ought to be considering. And I would actually do the war between Israel and Syria only, but it might come a bit out of context. And regrettably, I'm going to have to start off with the war against Egypt first. Now, Israel is a rather small country, and it relies on its army to mobilize people, a citizens' army, if you like. So people go off their 3 years national service, and then they have to go back to the army regularly until they're even in their 50s. Depending on their physical condition and what have you. So the one idea that occurred to the Egyptian or the Syrian leadership was, well, why don't we pretend we're going to attack Israel, and then we'll force them into mobilization, and this will have a highly detrimental effect on the economy. And they did this a few times. In 1969-1970, there was what was called a war of attrition between Israel and Egypt. Indeed, the Egyptians even sank towards the end of 1967. They sank an Israeli destroyer, which is called the Eilat. I think 43 or 45, 47, I can't remember. People were drowned. This was formerly a British ship, which had been launched in 1943. But there was effectively this state of war, and the Egyptians, above all, would be sort of bring up troops to the border, then they take them back. The point of doing this is not only to frighten the Israelis, because the Israelis would react by temporary mobilizations and things which then have an effect on the economy. But after a while, the Israelis just so it's them playing these games again. Let's just ignore them, and maybe they'll go away. Well, they ignored them, but they didn't actually go away, because the Egyptians certainly did intend to attack. Now, if both Syria and Egypt attacked at the same time, that would be pretty dangerous for Israel. But more dangerous would have been if Jordan had joined in. The leader of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, who'd led the country for 2.5 years or so, by the time of the 73 war, he actually saw King Hussein a few weeks beforehand. He sort of sounded him out without saying anything directly. King Hussein, who'd lost the West Bank 6 years earlier, wasn't very keen on the idea of a war, and I think he realized what he was being asked, but he declined to have anything to do with it. If he'd done the same 6 years earlier and declined to have anything to do with the Egyptians and Syrians, then he wouldn't have lost his the West Bank. Indeed, he was tricked into joining in the 6 Day War, if you like. And it was more or less the Israelis attacked him because he thought that the Egyptians were winning the war. He believed the propaganda coming from the other side, from his own side, from Egypt. Anyway, so on the 6th of October 1973, which was Yom Kippur, it was a Saturday. Now, on Yom Kippur is the holiest of holy days, and it's a fast day. Now, in some fast days in Jewish religion, you don't have to fast if the day falls on a Saturday, but Yom Kippur is the exception. You have to fast anyway. One should do. It's not obligatory as such, but everybody does it. Now, the thing is, choosing this day was unfortunate, although it wasn't chosen because it was Yom Kippur. It was chosen, contrary to just about everybody else will say, it was chosen because the tides on the Suez Canal ideally suited it. Now, and as Egypt was the lead partner, partner in this agreement with Syria, the Syrians went along with the date. So it's clearly the Egyptians had told them, and then they went along with it. Now, the thing about choosing this as a date, as Yom Kippur, a lot of people say, well, why didn't they choose the Jewish New Year, which had happened 8 days earlier, when people go to the beach, they get sloshed or whatever, and then rather than choose a day when people are either at home or in the synagogue or whatever, and then they're easily found. And this turned out to be a problem, and lots of people have said, well, this was bad planning. But it wasn't, because it was the day of the tides. Now, to get across the Suez Canal, it's a pretty wide river, and today I find myself when I see the fact that Ukrainians have crossed the Dnieper, I find this absolutely amazing. I have now earlier this week there was a crossing which was made to the east of Kherson. And well, I was there last year, and I can tell you the river's pretty wide, and it's possibly even wider since the dam was blown up, although I suppose the water might have gone down a bit by now. The canal is much bigger, and the plan called for them to cross in daylight. Israel had spent $500 million, that's $500 million, on a line of fortifications, of 67 fortifications along the length of the canal. They'd made the bank much higher to make it difficult. And the problem is that when you've got a fortification, like a line of fortifications, it is very, very difficult. It may be very difficult to break through, but it's very expensive to build, as the Russians no doubt are finding out. And not only that, the place where you've got to defend the whole thing, so it's very expensive in manpower. Indeed, by the time of the 6 Day War, half of the Israeli fortifications had already been abandoned. The next thing that happened was that, well, how do you get through this wall? Because it's quite difficult to do so, and the Egyptians came up with a very clever idea. Rather than blowing the wall up, which would have taken ages because it was effectively loose sand, they came up with the idea of using fire hoses and fire equipment, which they managed to get in Germany, and thinking people who sold it no doubt thought they were using it for fire defensive, and the water was already in the canal anyway, so the water was there, and that was easy enough to do. Now, after the 67 war, the Soviet Union had supplied huge amounts of equipment to both Egypt and Syria. And part of this equipment was things such not only bridging equipment but also amphibious vehicles. And this allowed, when the Egyptian attack happened at 1400 hours on the 6th of October, the Egyptians got across the river, indeed the river, the canal. And not only that, they only suffered 200 people killed in the crossing. You think of this, they're crossing this wide open canal in broad daylight, and that only took 200 casualties. I mean, that's quite amazing. And if you compare this to things that happened in the Second World War, that above all, that's even more amazing. Now, so the commandos got across the first, then they scaled up the sandbank. They had rope ladders on them. They threw the rope ladders down, and other people went up across the ladders. Now, behind the Suez Canal, the Soviet Union had supplied SAM missile batteries. Now, these SAM missile has a range of approximately 24 kilometers, and this is really important because the Egyptian plan was just to get the other side of the canal, and then that's it. That was the plan. I don't know if this part of the plan had been actually given to the Syrians or not. That I don't know. So they got across the canal relatively easily. They captured, after a fight, some of these Israeli fortifications. I mean, there was one Israeli fort, I think, that fought on for about 10 days or something before it was subdued. And then what they did was they set up missile batteries on the other side of the canal, because they'd clearly understood what the Israelis were going to do. Now, as soon as the Israelis found out about this, the obvious thing to do was a hard counterattack. And so the first thing to do is to use the Air Force. And the Air Force attacked, and then the SAM missile batteries came into operation. And in the first 2 days of the war, Israel lost approximately 1/3 of its entire Air Force. And this was, for an Air Force which was used to maybe shooting down 6 Syrian jets for nothing more than a couple of scratches on one of its own aircraft. It suddenly found itself in a parity, sort of one of theirs for one of ours, so to speak. And this clearly was a situation which was untenable. So the Air Force was withdrawn. Nonetheless, Israel relies on 2 arms of its armed forces. It's the Air Force and then its tanks. Its tanks charged in, thinking they could just wipe out the Egyptian bridgeheads. The opposite happened, because the Egyptians had a Saga missile, which was about that long. It fits in a sort of a pod. It's wire controlled. It's got a range of 2.5-3 kilometers, something like that. And an operator can sit about 10-15 meters away from it and directs it onto the target using a joystick, and it's wire guided. And the Israelis attacked, not knowing that the Egyptians had this equipment, and they were soundly beaten, very, very seriously beaten. As a result, Israel had problems. So they decided that nothing more was going to happen in the Sinai, because there a much greater danger appeared in the north, which was the Syrian attack. Now, Israel managed to mobilize pretty quickly. Indeed, the defense minister knew at around 7 in the morning that there was going to be an attack. The cabinet met, and there was the defense minister, Elazar, wanted to have a preemptive strike, and Golda Meir overruled him, said no, we must be seen to be the one being attacked. We must have world opinion on our side. I only think that they actually agreed to this as a result of American pressure. That's just my That's my opinion. I did watch an interview last night though with Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, and he indicated the opposite. But anyway, whatever. So the now Israel did have a major problem now because with the Syrians bearing down on the north, having a tank force which was far greater than that of all of Israel's, and so this was, and there was very few tanks on the Golan. Now, the Golan Heights, which mark the border between Israel and Syria, are, in my opinion, I've traveled to quite a lot of battlefields, but the Golan Heights is still, for me, it is the second most attractive battlefield I know. The first is along the Socha Valley, the Isonzo. That is absolutely in Slovenia mainly now. A little bit in Italy. That's absolutely amazing. But anyway, but the Golan, to me, if I were to live anywhere in Israel, I'd want to live on the Golan. I thought there were really wonderful views and wonderful environment, volcanic outcrop. And what another thing it offers, though, is this fantastic views over the Jezreel Valley, over the lake. What's it called in English? Tiberias, Kinneret, Tiberias, fantastic, really wonderful place. Anyway, so in the north, you can see there's a Mount Hermon, and Mount Hermon is snow-capped for a reasonable bit of the year anyway, and so it goes up. The Golan Heights sort of rise up to Mount Hermon, which is in the far north, far north of Israel, I suppose, because even Israel does even have skiing possibilities there. In the south, it's flatter. And anyway, so there was two Syrian armored assaults on. And now, what the Israelis managed to hold them back for some time, but they were absolutely swamped. And they could have actually got through over the bridges of one bridge over the Jordan River. The thing is, the commander who was in charge of the tank group that there decided oh no, this is too easy, this is the trap, and he stopped advancing. Now there's one thing, if you're in a tank you say go 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 go, but anyway, he thought it was just being led into a trap, and so he stopped, and he wanted to be there during the day to reconnoiter the situation, and that by the time it was day, it was too late. There was already plenty of Israeli tanks around. Now, the thing is, the Israelis were using largely sort of British Centurion tanks, and so the Centurion tank was designed to fight the Tiger and Panther from the Second World War. So it had, but it was nearing the end of its life, and the Syrians had been issued with T-55s and T-62s, and they had night fighting capacity, so the infrared sights, which the Israeli tanks didn't have. So at night, the Syrians had a distinct advantage. Now, Israel bases its ability to knock out the enemy at a long range. Indeed, the British tanks have far better range than the Syrians. The Israelis could start shooting at them long before the Syrians even came into view. And another thing which is really important is this. So I need a tank. Here's a tank. No, can't find it. Never find a tank when we need one. Right. So the gun on the tank is so it depresses, but the Syrian ones could only depress 5 by 5 degrees, and the Israeli ones could do by 10 degrees. Well, this means that in what's called a hull down position, so your tank's there, it's on a hill or something, it'd be overlooking the brow of the hill, but offer a much smaller target. Now, the Soviet tanks were built for fighting in Europe, and so they tried to make them as small as possible. And so things that they've got inside the Soviet tanks, such as the auto reloader and thing that's to keep it as small as possible as also allowing it to actually fire quicker, whereas the American and British tanks, for example, were bigger to allow for more crew to be inside. And so this being a bigger tank also was an advantage in the desert because of their heat, and particularly, but it's the depression of the gun which is of really great importance as far as any fighting like this is concerned. And the Israeli one could go down much further. Thing is, though, the Israelis were absolutely swamped. Now, there's lots of stories, for example, about how one tank knocked up a lot of dust in the southern part of the Golan, so it made it seem as though there was lots and lots, and then the Syrians got frightened. Don't know, that might be true, it might not be true. However, after some major battles where the Syrians did not show a great deal of initiative. Now, at the beginning of the war, they captured Mount Hermon with a helicopter attack, which was quite well carried out. The initial assault maybe didn't show the thinking that the Egyptians had shown, but the Israelis were able to get the better of them. Now, and so the Israelis indeed started advancing, and they recaptured the land, and then started moving on a towards Damascus. They were advancing. At this time, help was coming in from other Arab countries. King Hussein, who didn't want to join the war, and so he'd learnt his lesson from the previous time, but then again, one might argue, so if he joined now when Israel was weaker, he might have reconquered the West Bank. He sent units, but the Iraqis sent quite a lot. Saudis sent a lot. Cubans, but they turned up largely after the war. But it was, I think it was about 1,000 Cubans were killed, or 500, I can't remember the exact numbers now. Saudi Arabia said that, and Morocco as well. So there were these units turned up, and because Israel started to think that, okay, it doesn't really want to capture Damascus and then deal with the problem of a large civilian population. So at the same time, though, Assad of Syria was begging the Egyptians to do something, because effectively nothing was happening in the Sinai. Now, Israel advanced to a certain point, and then they decided, that's it, we're not going to bother anymore, we're going to start moving. We've dealt with the enemy in the north, we're now going to start moving to the south. Now, in the south, the Egyptians decided to come to the help of the Syrians, but in doing so, they moved out of the range of their missile cover. And so when they started fighting now with the Israelis, more on the Israeli terms, and this was when Egyptians started to lose big time. Now, Ariel Sharon, later known as being a politician, he managed to get a unit behind the where the Egyptian second and third armies were, and which is just to the north of the Bitter Lake. So if you look at the Suez Canal, and then there's this big lake which is about 2/3 of the way down, and then it continues. So the Suez Canal was dug in two bits to join the Bitter Lake to the Mediterranean and to the Red Sea. So anyway, so the Israelis managed to get across there. They crossed the Suez Canal. Nobody told Ariel Sharon to do this. In fact, I think they'd have gone berserk when they found out what he actually did. In fact, he apparently was threatened with the sack, and he said, if they sack me, I'll just join up again under a different name. Now, obviously, once he'd got over at the other side of the Suez Canal with a small amount of men, what could he do when he was there? Well, if he'd stood there and done nothing, then it would have just created an artillery target, but he didn't. So then he started sending out groups in jeeps, and no doubt they had a great time when they were out there, but they did knock out SAM missile batteries. Now, the SAM missile batteries knocked out, the Israeli Air Force could once more come into its own. As a result, meanwhile, there were major tank battles close to where where Ariel Sharon had actually taken his ferried his troops across the canal. Indeed, Israel did have bridging equipment, but it was unable to bring up the bridging equipment because the road went through Egyptian lines. There's a place called Chinese Farm, and it was a Japanese agriculture experiment. Was done in the 1960s, and the Israelis mistook the letters to be Japanese rather than Chinese. So that's to be Chinese rather than Japanese. Sorry, and so anyway, so the it's often said that this is the greatest tank battle of all time. Okay, in numbers, it isn't, but it did occur to me that in terms of actual armor, if you did it rather than counting numbers of tanks, being counted weight of armor, it might well be the greatest battle of all times. Anyway, in the end, it became an Israeli victory. Israel, from the west bank of the Suez Canal, then sort of troops spread north and south, and they enveloped the Egyptians on the other side of the river. Now, by the canal. Now, by this time, the Soviet Union was getting rather perturbed. Egypt had agreed that the Soviet Union, in fact, clearly did know about the attack because it had arranged for supplies to actually keep coming in during. The United States had done an emergency airlift, and indeed a number of countries had refused the Americans to use bases to supply Israel, and it was indeed Portugal which allowed, via the Azores, which allowed American planes to actually land there. And things were, they were landed in Israel, and then they were sent to the, they didn't even bother trying to take the markings off, showing that the American equipment, no more than the Egyptians actually took off the Soviet markings. You can see this things which have been shot up, or photographs, you can blow them up and you can see they've still got the Russian markings on them. Now, Kissinger realized that it wasn't a very good idea, though, to have the Egyptians humiliated. And now I'm going to resort to history. In 1866, there was a war between Prussia and Austria, and the king of Prussia wanted to have a victory parade through Vienna, and Bismarck said no. We mustn't humiliate the Austrians, because he was thinking long term. He wanted an alliance with the Austrians. Now, I think that Kissinger was thinking something along these lines as well. He didn't want to have the Egyptians humiliated, and he said that there was the Egyptian Third Army was surrounded, and that Americans would start supplying the Egyptian Third Army with food and things, not with arms, but with food, just to stop people starving. And then this put Israel in a rather difficult state. Now, it was ceasefire, it was broken, some of the ceasefire was broken, but the third time it all worked out nicely. There was a ceasefire, and everybody went back to where they came from. Now, the big question is this: who won the war? Because now there's a museum in Cairo. I haven't been there. I've never been to Egypt, but I'm told that if you go there, it's completely. It looks as though Egypt actually won the war. Now, Egypt suffered I would say, possibly the greatest military defeat of all. No, maybe not the greatest of all, but one of the greatest of all times. Military defeat. And the reason for that, I think that this crossing of the canal, I mean, it could have worked out completely wrong, but I think the crossing of the canal by the Israelis it is genius, and maybe it worked out very well for them. But so you got this music and you think Egypt had won the war militarily. Well, it didn't. But But if anyone said to me, well, who won the war? Well, you win something by getting what you want out of it. So if you buy a ticket for the lottery and you hope you're going to win the lottery and you get the money, then you've won, haven't you? So it's not. Or alternatively, if you actually win a prize which is the same value as your ticket, then you haven't really won the lottery. So it depends what you actually want. Now, what Egypt wanted, it didn't want to destroy Israel. What it wanted was to get the territory it lost in the 1967 war back. And as a result of this war, that's precisely what happened. There was peace conference. There was both sides pulled back. It wasn't like after the 67 war with the war of attrition, Camp David, and then Israel just started pulling back. And Israel went back to, except for Gaza, which Egypt didn't want, it went back to the line which was demarcated in 1906 as being the border between the British Empire in Egypt and the Ottoman Empire in Palestine. So I can say that Egypt won the war. I can also say that Israel, in a way, well, as far as Egypt was concerned, what did Israel want? It wants security, it wants a peace agreement. So it got a peace agreement with Egypt. It got a peace agreement with Jordan. It took a bit longer. Now the question is a peace agreement with Syria. So it didn't get the peace agreement with Syria. So as far as who won, number one position is Egypt. Number two position is Israel. And number three, the loser, if you like, is in a way it's Syria, because it still hasn't got this peace agreement. So it lost a bit more land, but then again the Israelis pulled out. Not only that, the town of Kunitra, or Kunitra, I don't know how to pronounce it. I can't speak Arabic. Was handed back, although it's completely empty. You can actually see it though from the Israeli side. And it is quite strange being there, because actually when you get there you can see there's quite a big area between. It's not like borders in most places, or even if you look at the border from Israel into Jordan, you can see they've got a Jordanian flag and you see people in the towns and all the rest of it. But this border between Israel and Syria, this long expanse, and at least it was where I was anyway. Good. Right, so that's it really. That's my expose of this war. Now I thought of doing more on this. I thought for the 50th anniversary, but then again I didn't do it, so I keep thinking of things I want to do and then I don't do them. I did one little video which I shall publish in 2 weeks time, which I did the video 3 years ago, and it was on Brezhnev. Made a comment on what he thought of the Arab-Israeli war of 73. And so I found this quote of his somewhere, and I thought that was very good. So anyway, good. So what I'll now have a quick look at some of the. So Darren, hello, Andy in Coventry. I went to Coventry once. I got on the bus there. I went to see the university there. And Colin says there's a lot of knocked out expanders on the Golan Heights. Yeah, there's quite a lot of them. You can still see them. Sorry, when I was there, you could still see them. I mean, I haven't been there for some time, but yeah, there's the. I thought they'd left them there deliberately, though. To be quite honest, I thought even some of the turrets have been turned round. And so they've got the T-72s, but they pointed them back. Quite strange, because in Ukraine I saw lots and lots of knocked out equipment, but I didn't see so many tanks. And I think mainly because the tanks were actually moved away, but you got lots of APC, armored personnel carriers, things like that in Ukraine, all over the place. I mean, on my videos, I have actually videoed a T-84? I can't remember what it was anyway, or T-90. And, no, I can't remember a T-90, T-84 I think it was, whatever. And Russia this week lost its 5,000 tanks. It's lost. The British Army, I think, has got less than what 250 or something, and 5,000 it's lost. And it's still finding more. Apparently, it's got about 8,000 tanks, or had anyway. It's got about 3,000 left. Anyway, Mohammed says Syria had problems during the 1973 wars. Iraq sent 180 tanks and it lost 80 tanks immediately due to Israel long-range firepower. Yes. Now, there is, I think, one of the... I don't know if a film's been made. It must be a film made of this. It's just that there was an Israeli commando raid on the border between Syria and Iraq, and they blew up a bridge. And anyway, I can't say more than that because I don't know any more than that. But I'll be surprised if there isn't a film on that. I mean, that's a pretty good story, isn't it? And anyway, so Sean writes, given the current situation, would the West reconsider the German Madagascar plan? Well, for whom? Yeah, as I said when I did the last thing, when I said on Gaza, okay, Israel was put in the wrong place. The thing is, the people are there now, so they're not going to be, they're not going to be moved. And the Jewish homeland we built in in East Prussia, for example, that might have in 1945. That would have been, I would have thought that would have been on, but I mean now it's not the case. The problem is this, because the problems that are today in 2023 are the same as they were in 1973. The problem of the West Bank, for example, and maybe now it's even worse because it's gone on for such a long time. Now, if you talk to anybody in Israel about it, and they'll always say the same thing, is that it's who do you do a deal with? Because there's one group, then there's always somebody that's going to say no, and there's all sorts of splinter groups and splinter organizations which won't agree to anything. And so they just want war. They just want fighting. Now, I've seen Hamas people interviewed on the television. Well, on the internet, I haven't got television. Then they go on about 1947, 1948, or whatever. I mean, that is pointless now. They have to move on. They have to realize that the world has moved on, and talk. It's all right for me to talk about something like this because I'm doing a history video. It is, but if they want to get solutions, saying that, oh, you British are responsible because you split up Palestine in this way, yeah, maybe, yes, sure. I mean, that's a very good argument on a history channel, but it doesn't resolve the problem today. And so the thing is this, as far as Gaza is concerned, is it any wonder that Egypt doesn't want to take responsibility for something like this? But then again, let's think of the poor people. I mean, Hamas is what, a few thousand. There's 2 million people living there. So what about them? On the other hand, in 1973, there wasn't the problem of the settlements yet. Okay, Jerusalem might have been a bit awkward, but there wasn't all of these settlements in the West Bank. And to a large extent, these have been done first of all by sort of these pioneers. But I'm trying to think of a negative word for pioneers. I can't think of one. But these people sort of think that they have some right because of what's written in the Bible, or was written 3,500 years ago, to go there and to eject people off land. And unless Israel can do something about that, it did kick the people off, kick those settlers out of Sinai, but there wasn't that many of them, and they did kick those out of Gaza as well. But would it do the same on the West Bank? And that is part of the problem, and it's the idea of this either history or misinterpretation of history, which I think is the problem, in my opinion. Anyway, good. So Collins says Sharon based his tactics on the long-range desert group, which I didn't know. As a military leader, I think, sorry, in this war anyway, in the 73 war, then I think Ariel Sharon really does stand out. He stood out in the 67 war as well. The NASA was in 1940. He was surrounded. Somewhere not so far from Gaza. I've forgotten the name of the place, and I think it starts with F. But he was surrounded, and the Egyptians were they were cut off, and he was allowed to get out. So it was rather humiliating for him. At the time, he was an army officer, and on the subject actually of the problem with Hamas is that it comes from, it started off as a charitable institution. In fact, it was from the Muslim Brotherhood. Anwar Sadat had actually been a part of the Muslim Brotherhood in the 1940s, and although he sort of became actually more moderate as he got older, and when he was assassinated, when he was killed, it was by jihadists who killed him, and the reason they did it apparently was because he sought peace with Israel. Anyway, so Colin says even Arafat didn't trust his own people. He always carried a sidearm. I don't know. I thought I don't know if it was because he didn't trust them. I thought that was just for show. But anyway. Actually, on that very subject, when when Sadat was killed, the people in the lorry, what happened was there was a lorry that actually there's some planes went over. Sadat was watching them. In the meantime, this lorry stopped, and one got out, started shouting abuse at him. Sadat stood up, and then others, he sort of went back in the lorry, picked up his weapon. Now the weapons were issued for show, but you don't give live rounds when you're on the parade ground. And then they opened fire and used grenades, and that's how Sadat was actually killed. So I think he absolutely did the right thing, trying to get peace, and he actually did restore the Egyptian border. And there's one thing that Kissinger said, is this: it's what's important for historical purposes is perception. Egypt perceives that it won the 1973 war, and that is what is the important thing, not if it won it or it didn't win it. Victories in the mind. And then, without any doubt, the crossing of the canal was a major achievement from a military point of view. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and I don't think I got too technical then. In fact, I don't think I said anything technical. I hope that was of interest, and good. So tomorrow, Arafat survived a few assassination attempts. It must be very difficult in a situation for him. I mean, really, he put his neck out literally, and he lost it. Actually, on this subject, I remember I had a friend at the time from Egypt, and he told me that his wife told him Arafat had been, Sadat had been killed, and he said, "Good, great." He didn't like him at all. And his wife then refused to speak to him for about 3 days because he was happy at this the assassination. Anyway, okay. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Sean. Thank you. And right, today I did a couple of videos. I didn't do writing today. I just put them together. I wrote them in Gdansk in the summer, and so I'll be they'll going up in November. I'll be doing quite a few videos actually in November. So towards the end of the year, I've got I'll possibly go about 40 to do something like that. Okay, thank you. All the best, and bye for now. Bye.